Welcome in. Here we go. It is the Writ Race for May the 19th. It's a Thursday edition of this daily version of On the Ledge, the Ontario Politics Podcast. Welcome in. I'm Dave Trafford for Story Studio Network. 2 weeks to Election Day. And we will be, as we have been throughout this campaign, in your inbox with our analysis, our views, our questions, concerns, the what the heck going on as far as the campaign is concerned. Just 2 weeks away. So I don't know that we're going to see much shift, but mentioned yesterday during the Wednesday episode with Sabrina Nanji and John Wright that I was heading off to host and moderate a town hall discussion focused specifically on the unique issues in Scarborough. There are 6 ridings in Scarborough, and they're all in play pretty much to some degree. So it's important that we kind of take a look at what's going on there. The event was organized by the Scarborough Community Renewal organization, along with the Rotary Club in Scarborough and the Scarborough Business Association. And we dealt with 4 different issues. One was about healthcare, particularly around the Scarborough Health Network and how abysmally it has been ignored. Can you be ignored abysmally? Well, if so, it has been. We also talked about the Planning Act that, to some degree, begins to be a bit of an issue for folks in Scarborough because there's the plan being that, we would come in and create more density, or we would create space for more folks to live in neighborhoods that already exist. And it all sounds great, but there's all kinds of usable land in Scarborough already. So why would we start to chew up and break up neighborhoods when we can, repurpose or use land that's available? So we got into that, and it was really the heart of affordable housing. That was the question. And, of course, a perennial discussion in Scarborough is always around the higher order transit, LRT, subway, etc. And how there's that transit wasteland, that transit desert that it happens up in the particularly the northeast part of Scarborough and Toronto proper. So we had a very spirited discussion about all that. The 4 of the parties were represented. Mitzi Hunter is a candidate for Scarborough Guildwood. Dolly Begum is a candidate for the NDP in Scarborough Southwest. Priyan De Silva is a Green Party candidate in Scarborough Rouge Park. And Rain Vega is the candidate for the New Blue Party of Ontario for the riding of Scarborough Agincourt. You will notice that there was no mention of a progressive conservative candidate there. There was all kinds of effort, and a number of invitations did go out, but all were declined, or perhaps accepted and then declined. And that has been more or less the pattern of behavior for the Tories generally in settings like this, have not wanted to put themselves out publicly. So what I thought we would do is I want to focus on the final topic of discussion, though, that came up. And it was, I think, a rather good one and an important one. And that had to do with pretty much what we've been talking about off and on throughout this campaign, and that was the whole matter of poverty. And if there's any place where we can see concentrated poverty, it's in Scarborough. And we begin with that staggering number of people who live or who try to live on ODSP checks or Ontario Works checks. More than 1 in 10 adults in Scarborough rely on a disability pension check or a welfare check to get through the month. So I'm just going to call an audible. I'm going to flip to the 5th one on here because I think it's right now in terms of this campaign, it's probably, for me, historically watching provincial campaigns might be the most significant development that we've seen in the discourse in the short period, in this first couple of weeks of the campaign. And I produced a podcast for the folks at Daily Bread Food Bank. It's called the 2030 Project. And it's all about the need and the push to reduce poverty by 50% by the year 2030. And there's a federal initiative that's the backbone of it. And by all accounts, the poverty reduction strategy in Ottawa was working. There were real signs of progress. COVID comes along, everything goes off the rails. And at the heart of that is that whole sense of institutionalized or legalized or legislated poverty, that we have people in this province who have to get by on $1,169 a month. Now, you can't have a conversation about affordable housing and talk about that kind of check in the inbox. So I thought it was remarkable that at whatever level, all four parties at the leaders' debate said that they were going to commit to increasing ODSP, the Ontario Disability Support Program, and Ontario Works. What staggered me is 2 days ago I had Dave Hardy on my podcast, and he tells me that 10.6% of Scarborough's population relies on ODSP and welfare. That is a staggering number. So good news is there seems to be all-party consent here that we want to increase that. So what happened here, Mitzi, that all of a sudden, and I say that with all due respect, all of a sudden poverty became an issue that rose to the top and has become a priority for everybody, no matter what the political stripe.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, David, poverty has always been on the forefront for me in my advocacy on behalf of the people of Scarborough. Just look at the push for COVID supports here and making sure that hotspot communities, priority communities get more of the response. And part of that is linked to those social determinants of health, such as, food security, housing, employment. And, along with the sad statistic that you just gave, a third of children who live in Scarborough rely on the federal child benefit, and
that's a sign that it's working. That's a good
program. It's a good program. It's lifting those children out of poverty, but it's a sign of the need.
You bet. Yeah.
And so I believe that the plan that we have in terms of economic dignity, raising the minimum wage on January 1st, 2023 to $16, and then moving towards a living wage. Many of the individuals working in our community earn minimum wage. So that delay for 3 years in raising the minimum wage really hurt people. And if you look at the food bank use, 30% increase in food bank use in Scarborough that the Daily Bread Food Bank, Who's Hungry report has demonstrated. And so if there is a cry coming from our community, it's food security. It is an area that we must address. Yes, we're doing it with food banks. We've opened 2 new food banks in Scarborough to meet that demand, but it's also all of the other supports. We talk about lowering transit fares to $1. Well, that's putting more money back in the pockets of the individuals and those families who do need to get to work and to get around, and it's saving them those dollars. And all of the things that we are doing to address that affordability now, that urgent increase due to rising inflation, is really directly hurting our families in Scarborough, and they need real relief and real support, whether it's childcare, whether it's transit, and whether it's jobs and economic employment, even just things like having paid sick days, having portable benefits that allow individuals to save for retirement, to access a benefit package for mental health supports, dental support, other healthcare supports. Those are needed now, and it really respects the fact that not everyone receives that through their existing workplaces, and we, the Ontario Liberals, will make it specific to the individual, not to the employer.
So let's, Rain, the idea of the increasing ODSP and Ontario Works right away. In some cases, we're going to double it depending on what the other parties are saying. So in varying degrees, the Liberals, the NDP, the Green, and the Conservatives have all said they're going to do that. Where does the New Blue Party stand on this?
Yeah, so as far as the poverty situation, the fact that we're still experiencing that in 2022 is fascinating, right? So it's just another example of how Scarborough has just been completely neglected.
So how do you address it? How does the party address it?
Well, we have to reallocate funds that are being wasteful. I mean, this is just a really huge talking point for the New Blue Party of Ontario, right? There's tax subsidies that are in millions upon millions of dollars that are being wasted that we need to really reallocate into communities like Scarborough. I mean, as far as the poverty situation is concerned, there's sustainable jobs, obviously, that we have to focus on because there's a lack of that. The job security is a huge problem, right? So as you were talking about the minimum wage and what's the point of talking about affordable housing if you don't have sustainable jobs? So, the New Blue Party platform is really about cutting where it's unnecessary and reallocating those funds to the community of Scarborough so that we can finally get out of this poverty situation. I mean, it's just insane, like I said, that in 2022 we're still suffering through this, and especially in a country like Canada. I mean, it's just completely mind-boggling. So really, as far as the New Blue Party is concerned, we need to start reallocating the funds where they need it the most, and especially in the communities where we can start building up on the jobs. Then we can start focusing on the affordable housing, maybe even take a look at affordable daycare and make sure that families aren't struggling with that either. I mean, if you think about what we were talking about earlier when it comes to transit, think about the father and mother that have to go around taking their kids to daycare, having to spend all this money on transit costs and daycare costs, and they're making minimum wage, and it's just compounded in so many different areas. So there's so much that we need to target. It's not a simple answer, but we need a plan, and we need a party that cares, and we need a party that's not going to neglect Scarborough any longer.
The number that gets thrown out by the Ontario umbrella group that oversees connects all the food banks across the province, Priyan, has estimated that poverty costs Ontario $33 billion a year. And I've been spouting that number for the last 4 years, saying, what are we doing here? Well, how can we afford poverty? We can't afford poverty. Mike Schreiner was the first leader at the debates to bring that number up the other night. Now, I give him full credit for doing so, but what took him so long?
So we've been pushing for a universal basic income to ensure that the individuals with the most need in our community get taken care of. And we've been using the lens of climate change to ensure that the people who are living in poverty are ensuring that they are taken care of during the effects of climate change. Now, the number that you bring up, I believe that's the number that the Food Banks of Canada has provided. Food Banks of Ontario, yeah, I believe, has provided, and it's a really great breakdown. And we understand that looking at the data that's available, we would actually increase the financial availability to use on other programs if we do ensure we provide universal basic income for all. We just want to ensure that it is done equitably. So as you had mentioned, individuals on ODSP and OW, but also ensuring that in Scarborough Park, especially in Scarborough, that the people who take care of our seniors, our loved ones who are aged, also are part of that program. And caregiving is one of those things that ensures that the end-of-life process is there for our seniors, and those caregivers are very important and should be have access to universal basic income as well.
Okay, let's go to the panel for the follow-up question here, and Andrea, we'll go to you, and Dolly, if you can field it, we'd be grateful.
So I want to clear the elephant in the room right now, and if you look at Scarborough, 860,000 of us, about, I hope I get this right, 70% or maybe 74% of us are new immigrants. When I came to this country, it took me, and I came to Scarborough, by the way, it took me, and I never move again, right? So it took me 3 to 5 years to settle, coming from the Caribbean. And so you look at 70% of new immigrants coming into Scarborough. So we're talking about the South here. I didn't hear why. Why do we have 10.6% of Scarborough population on ODSP and on Ontario Works? So if we don't find out what the root cause is, we will never get to a solve. The 10.6% every year, it's going to continue to increase. Okay? We have University of Toronto Scarborough campus. We have Centennial. Our Scarborough students are being educated. I've got 3 of them. All 3 of my kids are at University of Toronto Scarborough campus. I spoke to students that actually come out of the university and college, cannot find jobs in Scarborough. Okay? That's a big root cause. I launched my business in 2019. I went to employment centers in Scarborough looking for candidates in Scarborough. Do you know where I got them from? Brampton, Mississauga, and in North York. So there is a systemic situation that we have to look at first. The equity lens has to be there for every diversity person who is living in Scarborough. So to the panel, Dolly, have you looked at the root cause of all these questions that have lined up? Thank you.
Amen, sister. That was, I think, yes, 100%. And you've highlighted so many issues that so many marginalized families, so many working families across Scarborough face. You know, when the pandemic hit, when I was talking to one of the families and the kids were, telling me how they're sad that schools closed, and not because they missed specific things, because I was thinking, well, are you missing your friends? Well, yeah, we are. They had breakfast programs. And unfortunately, at home, they don't have the ability to have breakfast. That means they relied on that nutrition program, that breakfast program they had in the community. And it just breaks my heart to think that we have little kids who live below the poverty line, who rely on school breakfast program just so they could have something to eat. And that's probably for the entire day if they are, lucky enough to have lunch or wait until dinner time, which is probably the only meal they properly have. And that is the reality that we face. In my riding of Scarborough Southwest, we have one of the neighborhoods which is one of the highest child poverty areas. And when we talk about the root causes, we look at the years of neglect in systemic, and one of the terms that many experts and now many politicians are throwing around, and I'm going to do it again as well, is legislated poverty. We have legislations that have allowed people to fall through the cracks. When we talk about ODSP and OW, it doesn't allow someone to get out of that system. You have an amount which doesn't allow them to have enough to feed themselves, to pay their rent. And then we're talking about as soon as they try to get a job, which is probably a minimum wage job, here you are taking away that money back. So you're punishing them for trying to get out of that system. Why do we have legislated poverty in Scarborough? We need to have solutions that work, and which is why we need to make sure that we're doubling OW and ODSP so they actually have enough to survive on. And then we need to make sure that we have a system that works so that they're going out of that systemic poverty, that going out of the system so that they can get jobs, they can actually allow themselves to live a dignified way.
So I know you've got a hard stop here at 8 o'clock, and I listen, amen, sister. I'm with you on all of this. I was
just going to share the solution.
No, but I agree in terms of the passion that we kind of need to get past the institutionalized poverty. That's the crisis here, right? So credit to all of you for at least stepping up and saying this needs to be fixed. Can we do it tomorrow? I mean, really, let's make it the priority that we need to do. So let's do this. We've got about 10 minutes. So can we just come down the line? Give me 2 minutes and be tight on this. What makes what you are offering to Scarborough, and I realize you're not running against each other, but in terms of, the issue that you think is the priority for this community, for the next government to address on June the 3rd. Let's start with you, Rain.
There seems to be a common theme that's coming up in all these questions and discussions. Been really great discussions, by the way, with this panel. It's lack of funding, I think, in my personal opinion, that is the problem. Right now, with the new blueprint through the New Blue Party of Ontario, HSD, we want to drop that down by 3%. We want to, like I said, get rid of the tax subsidies. We want to get rid of that online gambling license that was afforded to the Toronto Star and start reallocating. So I think the more funding that starts coming into the community, the more we can start seeing these positive changes, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in jobs, and having really sustainable jobs, because, as Andrea was talking about, we have to have that equity, right? So why is it that people are still on ODSP? That's a great question, and we're not going to have the answer tomorrow. But we have to take a look at these things and ask ourselves why. But sustainable jobs, I think, is going to be huge. So the New Blue Party is committed to really targeting a lot of these communities, in particular Scarborough. I'm obviously representing Scarborough Agincourt. But I do have a candidate here from Guildwood who's very passionate, has been living here for 33 years. She knows how difficult it is. And she is fed up, and that's why she's here, to listen to me babble a little bit. So these are really important topics, and we're not going to have an answer overnight, but the New Blue Party is committed to make change. It's time to bring this province back. It's time to eliminate all this useless spending, start putting it into programs and hospitals and into the community so we can start flourishing again like we used to.
Thank you, Rain. Let's go to Dolly. Can you give us your 2 minutes on what is the issue that needs to be addressed the morning after the election?
Thank you so much. And I just want to say thank you for hosting this panel as well. The main issue that we need to address right now, and I think has been the theme here for Scarborough, is affordability. To make sure that we help people get through, especially after this pandemic, we get through the not just this COVID crisis, but what we're facing with poverty, with healthcare. Mental health is a huge issue as well, that I know if we had time, I would have gotten one of the panelists asking me about that as well. We have to invest in pharmacare, we have to invest in dental care, and we have to make sure that we're doubling the OW, the ODSP funding, as well as focusing on people who are on disability, who need autism funding, and the different types of support system that we have in our communities as well. We need community health clinics to be well supported, well resourced, so that they can do the job. And one of the things that we have to address is making sure that people, who are working hard, they're not paying too much. So one of the things we want to do is freeze taxes for middle class families, for low income families, but also making those who make enough, who are on the top 1%, pay their fair shares, making sure that corporations that are making business in our province, in our, neighborhoods, they are able to pay a little bit more so that the rest of the people in Scarborough, for example, can have their fair share. And I know just give me that.
Thank you, Dolly. We're trying to go run on your schedule, so we just don't want to make sure that we rush anybody. Mitzi Hunter.
Thank you, David, and thank you so much for hosting tonight, and to the wonderful panel for your pointed questions, and to the audience here tonight and those watching. The Ontario Liberal Party has put forward a fully costed plan that will, on day one, bring relief to families in Ontario to make sure that Ontario continues to be a place to grow. And that starts with lowering TTC fares to $1 so you can get on the TTC or on the go for $1 or just $40 for a monthly pass, putting more money back into your pocket. For those on ODSP, a 10% increase this year and another 10% increase next year, because we know that there are challenges to finding employment when you have a disability in this province, and we want to make sure that those supports are there. When it comes to good paying jobs, and I want to thank Andrea for calling out the elephant in the room. My family and I immigrated to Canada from Jamaica so that we could have a better life. And it was through hard work and education that my brothers and I have found that. And families that are in Scarborough need to have that hope. Young people in Scarborough need to have that hope. We want to have those good paying jobs here. And in order to have them, we have to build and invest in housing, in transit, in healthcare, in the environment, and in our community. One of the things that I'm doing is putting forward a private member's bill to make our community safer by ending gun violence. Those are the aspects to make sure that Scarborough has a bright future. I am so excited about the future of Scarborough. These are generational investments, and we need a government in place that can make that happen. And I know that only the Ontario Liberal government can defeat Doug Ford so we can continue to make progress for the people of Scarborough.
Thank you, Mitzi. Priyan, bring us home.
Thank you, Chi Miigwech. The Green Party of Ontario will be deconstructing, as we were talking about the elephant in the room, deconstructing the colonial oppressive systems and rebuilding them through the lens of equity, ensuring that our greenhouse gas emissions are reduced while providing opportunities to all of Scarborough and Scarborough Rouge Park to be part of the leadership that our province needs to ensure prosperity, wealth, a healthy planet, and ensure that we have something to leave behind for future generations.
Thank you all for coming out tonight, particularly those of you who have sat through here. We've got a full house in the room, so give yourselves a round of applause for making the effort to come out. We want to thank those of you who are following along on YouTube, and if you kind of missed it halfway, the recording will be available on YouTube, so you can actually go in and check up on it as well. And I know there were some folks who tried to get here, couldn't. There were other obligations. But we want to thank certainly the organizers, the Scarborough Community Renewal Organization, Rotary in Scarborough, the Scarborough Business Association. Can we acknowledge that group? Our sponsors tonight, Hardy Stevenson and Associate, Newton Place, also Pace Law, Agis Sabaratum Insurance and Investment. And, well, none of this would have got out of the side of the room if we had had the folks at Tamil One, so thanks for all the help there. And to our candidates, Mitzi Hunter is the Liberal Party candidate in Scarborough-Guildwood. Thank you. Dolly Pagum for the NDP in Scarborough Southwest. Priyan De Silva running for the Green Party in Scarborough Rouge Park. And Rain Vega is the candidate for Scarborough Agincourt for the New Blue Party of Ontario. Thank you all very much. So I know that this has been a really important debate, discussion that we had. And the reason I know this is because the people at MLSE actually took note of this. They made sure that there would not be a conflict between this event and playoff hockey for the Leafs. So you are on everybody's calendar tonight. Thanks for coming out. We really appreciate your effort tonight. Good night.
Yeah, that was good. I quite enjoyed that. It was nice to see a room full of people, and judging from the YouTube channel, lots of folks were checking it out from the desktop at home, so that was good. If you would like to get the whole play of that discussion, you'll find it on YouTube. Focus on Scarborough is the channel. Focus on Scarborough. And you get the full breadth of the discussion and the issues and how they're, playing out among all the parties. And what was good about this is that they weren't talking about their own ridings specifically. It's not like all these candidates were running against each other. They were talking about, they're running in different ridings and talking about the party and its approach to the issues in Scarborough. Focus on Scarborough. All right, tomorrow, Friday morning, the On the Ledge team will be assembled around the table, and so we'll wrap up the week with Keith Leslie, Sabrina Nanji, John Wright, and moi. Dave Trafford will be here and in your inbox. It's the Writ Race. It's the daily edition of On the Ledge, the Ontario Politics podcast for Story Studio Network. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you tomorrow.